For more, I spoke with the CEO of the African Wildlife Foundation, Patrick Bergin. I began by asking him about the progress being made regarding wildlife and the ivory trade in Africa.
I think personally, my personal view is that the trade in ivory is over for good. The last sale of legal ivory was in 2008. 4 countries on an experimental basis were allowed to sell ivory. They grossed $15 million from that sale. But really, it's caused more problems than it solved. Even our organization, African Wildlife Foundation, has spent more than $15 million in the last few years trying to put out the fire of illegal trafficking. And African countries are having to up their security to deal with corruption. It's putting a burden on the court system. Park rangers are getting killed. So I really don't think there is a future in trading ivory. We need to look at a diversified and sustainable economy. And if we look at what conservation does, it really underpins the whole economy. I'm thinking of things like climate change mitigation, water catchment, the cultural resources. Domestic tourism is growing very rapidly. As Africa urbanizes, people want to go out and enjoy wild places. Support for the agricultural economy, pollinators and pest control, all these are things that are ecological services that are underpinned by African countries engaging in conservation.
So Patrick, let's start by looking at the impact of Chinese investment. How would you describe its impact on the African continent?
I think Chinese investment in Africa has been a game changer for the whole continent. The Chinese have come in a big way. They're building infrastructure. They're investing in key sectors. And I really think it's going to help break open the entire economy of the continent.
And what do you think, would you say, are some of the key sectors that are really benefiting from this investment?
Well, you know, that's just it. It's not so easy to name a single sector because I don't know if I can think of a sector that the Chinese are not investing in. But, you know, some of the obvious ones, construction for sure, you know, road building, dam building, hydropower, different kinds of power, agriculture, mining. But then there are other sectors that you might not think of. For example, in the neighborhood where I stay in Nairobi, the Chinese are investing in real estate, condominiums, and office accommodation.
And Africa is actually the world's youngest continent in terms of the age of the population. So what sort of opportunities and initiatives are in place then to perhaps get them into some of those sectors?
Well, you've just touched on something really interesting, Rachelle, about, you know, what is this interest in Africa? Everyone thinks it's about natural resource extraction. That's true, and that's there. But there are other interests in Africa. Because there is this young population moving rapidly into the middle class, China is now looking at Africa as a place to sell goods. But further, and most interestingly, I'm hearing more and more, and I'm about to go back to China again, about the interest of Chinese companies in manufacturing on the continent, because they have to look at where's the next generation of workers for the manufacturing sector to come from. So I think we're going to see that in Africa as well.
Now, one thing that we tend to see in that quest for economic development, sometimes conservation efforts and concerns get pushed to the side. What are people doing then to try and strike a balance to make sure that those conservation efforts don't just fall by the wayside?
Well, this is precisely it, Rachelle, and this is why I'm speaking to you today, because of course we're the African Wildlife Foundation, and we're not anti-development at all. We want to see Africa, you know, grow into its capacity, but there's a big but. Africa is huge. The United States, for example, fits in Africa 3 times with change left over. We want to see planning, forethought, and political will so that we can talk about where various sorts of investments happen. And really our view is that Africa should be able to have it both ways, should be able to have very livable cities, a very good infrastructure backbone, productive farmlands, even manufacturing. But that doesn't mean that there couldn't be the very great wild landscapes and wildlife habitats, the Serengeti, the Kalahari, Kruger, the Congo Basin, Africa's apes. These great places could be conserved too if we have the foresight and the political will to do that.